Dr. Nqapheli Mchunu, research specialist at the SHRC in the Developmental, Capable as well as Ethical State Research Division, joins us now to further this discussion. Doctor, it's a great pleasure. Welcome to SA Today. Let's first unpack as well as understand the importance of this communique, specifically for G20 countries and the world order.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me, and good afternoon to your viewers. It is a very important communique agreement because it re-emphasizes and assures that the global or the G20 member states remain committed to a multilateral system despite the challenges that we have seen in the global community in the past 2-3 years. Given that this was the last meeting to be held under the SA presidency, it was important that this communique is signed so as to show that there were positive steps taken in the right direction when looking at South Africa's presidency of the G20, which has been under some form of spotlight given the USA's reluctance or uncertainty in terms of corporate buy-in or cooperative buy-in to the country's presidency.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, speaking of those signatures, Doctor, the presidency had actually sought to strongly promote or push for the African agenda with vested interest and, of course, focusing on debt, climate change, as well as its impact on infrastructure. We know our president had launched that Africa expert panel back in March with a sole purpose to actually galvanize efforts around debt relief as well as making reforms. And I'm sure you've just heard about it in our preceding clip to ensure inclusivity on policies and most importantly frameworks. But what exactly does this look like then in the possibility of these agreements being continued to be signed without the presence of the United States?
Yes, so I think what is most important to understand is that the G20 is made up of 20 countries. And whilst the United States is an important player, is a superpower in the global political world, any agreements or processes that the G20 member countries wish to pursue must be pursued, obviously with the hope that all countries will buy in. But in the case that a country such as the US is not necessarily showing that kind of cooperation and willingness to support these initiatives, the show will have to go on. But when we look, for example, at matters of climate change, the US has not prioritized climate change matters. If anything, it has taken intentional steps to essentially ensure that it is not part of the American agenda. However, countries such as Germany continue to reaffirm their commitment to climate change, and they've made significant pledges to South Africa to help with the just transition and the decommissioning of coal-related energy sources. So what the future looks like is essentially is about what can the African countries, obviously through the representation of South Africa, leverage, because there is a lot of change taking place in the global community. And one thing to also consider is that America's presence creates a vacuum. But in politics, a vacuum will always be filled by another country. It may be a China, it may be a Germany, whichever country.
I was just about to say exactly that, Doctor. I'm wondering, are we not then likely to see a reversal of some of these agreements when the United States actually does take presidency of the G20, especially considering the fact that Trump has not abandoned his stance on South Africa? Relations continue to be very frosty. And as you've just said, that belief now is very strong among analysts that, of course, Washington's withdrawal from multilateralism could very well leave that space for China to occupy, as you've indicated.
Yes, absolutely. But I think obviously we are going to have to keep an eye on proceedings between now and the end of the year where South Africa will be hosting the G20 nations. Because whilst you've correctly pointed out that Donald Trump has not abandoned his stance on South Africa, he is also he is one to change his mind on certain matters as well. We've seen him walk back decisions pertaining to several matters. For example, the Israel-Iran matter, the Russia-Ukraine matter, and his stance in relation to Vladimir Putin, who's the president of Russia. So I think we'll have to wait and see what happens between now and the end of the year. But in terms of all the progress that is being made, if when America takes over the G20 next year, they have already indicated that they will look to make the G20 much leaner, and they will look to essentially make it more streamline it to be more focused on certain areas. And of course, one of the casualties for such streamlining may as well be climate change and global health, where we've seen, of course, the US withdraw billions of dollars worth of funding, with public health funding across the continent. And of course, within South Africa, we've seen the devastating effects of that. However, because the G20 countries seem to be committed and they seem to be on the same page on multiple issues, even though there are these cracks, particularly on global affairs and positions when it comes to international conflicts. If these countries are willing to work together, they will ensure that there isn't a situation whereby one country is able to undermine or cancel programs that would have been made to the benefit of the entire group of 20 nations.
And let's expand on that point there, Doctor. I mean, specifically also around the communique that was signed around central banks as well as MDBs. I mean, I want us to take into account the disruption that Trump's tariff threats have, of course, disrupted the global economy. But what does the future look like for the group going forward? And the calls for South Africa to explore new allies while also strengthening their current ties in order to be able to keep its sovereignty, as you've rightly pointed out, on trade matters, especially while we remain within BRICS as well.
Yes, so I think there's an understanding that a multilateral system is how the world is going to function from now onwards. The days of having one or two superpowers are long behind us. And the trade matters that we are seeing are not obviously only harming one or two countries. It seems to be an issue that is harming multiple countries across the world. So it goes back to the matter of a vacuum being created, not just in terms of leadership, but also financially. Because what may start happening is countries such as South Africa may start looking for alternatives, but that may also have a ripple effect, because certain countries may begin to see the US as an unreliable trading partner. Yes, it is a powerful country with infinite amount of resources, but we are already starting to see particular changes in the global community. We're seeing, for example, the European Union trying to strengthen relations with South Africa. Even when you look at the United Kingdom, where there's somewhat of an agreement or an acknowledgement that a Brexit has not served the country economically. So there seemed to be a willingness to maybe revisit some of those relationships. And that will be the same for South Africa as well, because as you've said, South Africa is a member of the BRICS community, but it is also, it does have strong trading relations with the United States. But I think it's important to note that South Africa has never downplayed or undermined the importance of the United States as a trading partner. However, all South Africa said was that they will continue to prioritize certain matters, particularly, for example, when it comes to global conflicts, and we look at the Israel and Palestine conflicts and other matters pertaining to the global community. So it is important for South Africa to, of course, keep its options open, but we also do need to recognize that in a situation whereby the United States is pursuing an America First agenda, it is not going to be possible to negotiate and call for a multilateral system when one country seems to be interested in prioritizing its own narrow interests.
Great discussion there. Thank you so much for that clarity as well, Doctor. That is Dr. Nqapheli Mchunu, the research specialist at the SHRC, and we're just talking about the G20 Finance meeting that concluded this past week.